to Just Interesting, the podcast where nothing is fascinating, nothing is boring, everything is just interesting, which is my variation on Alex's tried and tested introduction to this podcast. But
you just made it so nothing's fascinating. Nothing's fascinating at all.
Everything is just interesting. Just interesting. Today's meaty topic of discussion will be a very topical one to do with COVID, that thing that nobody's talked about all year. It's in Australia, another very developed country that, again, at least in the British news, but perhaps in America as well, we don't really look at and talk about very much. But our question today is, are Australia's COVID quarantine rules violating human rights?
It's a really fascinating story, and it's when you think about it, it's what they're doing over there. It's kind of like, I mean, I won't talk about it too much now, but it's a mad story.
But before we get onto that cheerful topic, we'll be revealing things that we learned this week. And we'll be addressing our favourite comments of the week from our dear viewers on whatever platform you listen to us or watch us on YouTube. Thank you. And lovely comments. We'll be discussing those. And before we get into that, just want to say a special thank you to our gold members on Patreon.
Gold member.
Who are Hayden Smith, Sir Christopher McCrate, Simon Workman, Josh Chomatek, Peaswad, Emmett Tapia, Liam Mullen, Herb Brown, Matthew Ritter, and David Guevara. Matthew and David are brand new, so thank you for joining us this month. And
no, thank you so much. I mean,
thank you.
It's for everyone that joins us on our Patreon. It's something that we don't expect, but I mean, those guys in particular seem incredibly generous, far too generous.
So many of you in the gold tier now. That's it's just amazing. Thank you so much.
You really are fantastic people. We just couldn't do this without you. It's amazing. Kept us going ever since we started this podcast. Nearly a year ago now, we're reaching that magic anniversary.
That's crazy.
Didn't think
That's
we'd
crazy.
make it that
It's
far.
our 40th episode.
Yeah.
Madness.
Absolutely crazy.
Season 2 finale. We haven't even mentioned that.
Yeah, that's true.
Season or series?
The
we
finale.
said season in the end, didn't we? Or series?
Season. People want
Yeah,
season.
that was the vote. Yeah. Patreon people want a season. So we're going with season 2.
Oh.
This is it. This is the end. We shall be making possibly, changes. We haven't discussed it, have we?
I mean, yes. I mean, guys at home, suggest, and girls, I mean, I use guys as a collective. What do you have any changes that you think would be, good for us to make? We've got a few things in mind just to streamline, as they say in business.
Yeah,
that's my business head talking. Streamline. Develop ideas.
Yeah.
I reckon you should get rid of me first of all. First and foremost,
You're
cut
fired.
me out of it.
Yeah, you're gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's been discussed.
Then you're away. Yeah.
Replace you with a cardboard cutout of Nicolas Cage.
I think that's a fair trade, in fairness. Yeah, not the actual Nicolas Cage, just a cardboard cutout of him as an adequate replacement.
We should have at least one new edition, which is a prop, a prize that one of us will win for having been the best performer in the quiz this entire season. And sadly, that person is already known to us because they've got such a dominant lead. However, stay tuned for the quiz at the end of this episode, where Alex and I will go head to head to see if we can be second place.
It's the ultimate battle for second place, or the battle to, I guess, the battle to stay out of third place. Really,
well, that's true.
That's a very positive way of looking at it.
The
Alex,
shame
thank you
of
very
third
much.
place.
I think I was third place in the first season, so third place in the second season. I've got a lot on the line in this quiz.
But what a fall from grace if I go from first in season 1 to third in season 2.
Well, exactly. There's a lot riding on this quiz.
There is.
I'll
The stakes
have
are still
earned
there.
I'll have earned it if it happens, and you'll have earned it too, Alex, if you manage to avoid that fate. But before we get into everything else, please tell me, guys, what did you learn this week? Martin.
Well, mine's a little bit in relation to last week's episode, which was on video games and whether or not they are good or bad for your mental health in particular, right? Is what we were looking at. And coming out of China is a little bit of news. China. So on this story is from The Independent, and it's from the 7th of November, so 2019, so a year and a couple of weeks ago. But I think it's still relevant today because it follows on. And the story is that China, for the last year or so, has limited gamers under the age of 18 to 90 minutes of gaming per day on weekdays, and 3 hours at the weekends. And there's specific times that you can play these games in between there's a curfew between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. So I guess the idea is that they believe that there's an issue with children becoming addicted to video games or harmful effects of video games, and so that in a very typical Chinese way, let's say, they've decided to impose restrictions on this. And there's also restrictions on the amount of money children can spend as well, with children under the age of 16 only being able to spend £22 per month on games, and those between 16 and 18 able to spend double this. So China have restricted the amount of gaming you can do, and so it seems like, unless you're playing on Plants vs Zombies or Animal Crossing, the Chinese at least think that it's best if you restrict the amount of games you play under the age of 18. So I thought it was an interesting follow-on from last week, just to know that actually, China have taken a slightly different approach to gaming than what the study suggested.
Is that gonna hurt the amount of esports champions that they can produce?
Good question.
Compared to other countries.
Question. I don't know exactly how they police it. Whether it's done based on the fact that you register your account and you have to put an age next to your account, and then they monitor how much time you play. But I imagine that it's actually fairly difficult to police this, surely.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. But this is China, so that kind of overreach is possible.
This is true.
Yeah.
But it is China, so I mean, I'm interested in what the punishment is if you are caught breaking the rules.
Yeah, no, it doesn't actually say what the punishment is.
Reintroduce the one-child policy for families.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Wow.
And with that, we move on.
I'm sure that's not it. Nice. That's interesting, Martin. Thank you for that. Do you think it's right or do you think it's wrong?
I mean, I've got to be honest. When I was younger, I mean, maybe not from the ages of 16 to 18 or whatever, but when I was growing up, my parents said that I was only allowed to play at the weekends, so they were stricter than the Chinese government.
You could have said that then. You're stricter than the Chinese
government. Yeah, the authoritarian Chinese government. You're stricter. You're Nazis.
I feel like that was standard for our generation. That was
really.
Yeah.
I enjoyed playing it, and I know the kind of person I am. I've probably mentioned this before, but I would have played on it a lot more than probably 90 minutes if I had been allowed. So looking in hindsight, it was probably, for me personally, it was probably a good thing. So I actually did other things and got outside and experienced things at a young age when you're kind of developing, as opposed to just playing games. But yeah, I mean this kind of overreach. It's certainly not the most pressing concern coming out of China, but at the same time, it's just I don't know. I can understand why parents would want to limit this, but surely it's up to the parents, isn't it? And up to the families. It's not up to it's not up to the government to decide.
Yeah. The government can advise, but the parents should decide.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
So what did you learn, Alex?
Well, I learned something a little bit different than that. But do you know Ivan Pavlov?
Not personally.
Pavlov.
I wouldn't expect you to know him personally. Well, I mean, yeah, his dogs, Pavlov's dogs. Yeah. He's not the dog.
What?
In the experiment. But yeah, no, Pavlov's social conditioning experiments where he tested positive enforcement on dogs by actually, I can't remember what he did. He rang a bell and then gave them a treat and then measured their salivation levels, and then eventually he would ring a bell and the dogs would salivate even without being offered a treat. I think that was it.
At first I thought you said salvation levels. I was like,
have they prayed enough? Have they repented?
This dog is saved, thank goodness.
Yeah, but what I actually learned this week is a group of researchers from the University of Western Australia tested this same experiment, but with pea plants, so with plants as opposed to animals.
Seriously?
And what they did is so they basically put a plant. Imagine like a Y-shaped maze, so like a Y basically, but like in a tunnel. And they had the plant at the bottom of this tunnel.
Okay.
And what they did, or like imagine an uppercase T. I'm not making this clear. Basic.
Oh, carry on.
I'm not making this clear. Basically, they put a plant in a maze, and from one direction they shined a light on it.
Yeah.
For half an hour, and then, sorry, I've said this wrong. Okay, so
disaster.
Absolute
disaster. Sort your shit out. No, carry on.
I'm a drink and a half in. No, okay.
Please do carry on.
So what they did with these pea plants is they, first of all, they put a fan on the plants from one direction for about half an hour. Okay. And then they turned a torch on, like a light source, from that same direction. And then they turned the fan off after half an hour and then left the light on for another half an hour before turning it off.
It sounds like a Japanese torture method.
It's for a plant. It's for a pea plant. But what they found is that after turning on the light, the plants would naturally move to that direction, to the direction of the light source.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they tested this for several days. And then after several days, they just switched the fan on. So they just put the fan on and didn't put the light on.
Okay.
But they still found, in all cases, that the plants moved over to where the fan direction was coming from. And this has huge implications for memory and just, behavioral patterns of plants, whether they actually have anything more in the way of their own knowledge.
So even after
than we are estimating.
Sorry to interrupt. So even after they stopped doing the light, it grew in the direction of the light.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. That's crazy.
And they changed the light direction when they were conditioning these plants. They would do it from different angles, just so that they couldn't get. It wasn't like they just knew to grow in one direction. They would change it up each day. So I thought that was really interesting, and I feel like there's been another study since then that's kind of didn't get these exact same results. So I think more research is needed in this area. But it's an interesting study.
What does that mean then? Does that mean?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Day of the Triffids.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Is there any reasoning as to why this might be the case, or are they still kind of trying to decipher why there is this kind of, I don't want to say muscle memory, plants don't have muscles, but this memory.
I mean, I don't think there's any known reason how they're able to do this. Yeah, because it's natural instinct for them to grow towards light, but this would indicate that they have some kind of, like you say, muscle memory or some sort of memory that they can associate the wind with where the light is going to be coming from.
Fascinating.
I mean, I think that negative enforcement, they learn it quicker. The point they're trying to get across.
Right.
But then positive enforcement leads to stronger behavioral changes in the long term. I think that's what it was.
What I learned this week actually is to do with tattoos, but specifically tattoos that have been found on. Have you heard of Ötzi, the Iceman, who was found frozen in the Austrian-Italian Alps? I mean, a long time ago when he was found, decades ago. And they've done loads of research on him, and fairly early on they found tattoos because he was so well preserved. His skin is there. It's quite famously. And they found tattoos, and the more they've studied him, the more they've done kind of deep scans, and all kinds of new forensic techniques have come about, and they do more and more scans. I think they found over 81 tattoos or something like that. But what I learned this week,
you have lots of tramp stamps.
Lots of tramp stamps. Well,
big heart that said "mum" on it.
Exactly. But here's the interesting thing. So I found out this.
They found a star on his wrist
and a quotation from Harry Potter. Like what? But they found it back in 2015. They compared the pattern of the distribution of tattoos on his body, and there are over 80 of them. So it's a meaningful distribution, and it's over 80% of his tattoos correspond to classic Chinese acupuncture points.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Wow.
That's really interesting.
It's really interesting because this fellow's found in the Alps, but he's also 5,300 years old.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
as well as
exactly.
the fact that he's got tattoos is amazing, because it suggests it's a very ancient tradition. It suggests that he had some kind of acupuncture treatment, perhaps, because they know from the preservation of his body, they know he had all kinds of muscular problems and other diseases. So it's possible that these tattoos weren't just tattoos. They were actually part of some kind of medical treatment, which may have been ritualistic in its nature, hence the tattoos, but it might actually have been effective.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is it like evidence that shows that there's actually something to acupuncture? It could actually
I mean, maybe.
have some benefit.
It depends. You could take it either way, I suppose. If you don't like acupuncture, you could say, yeah, well, they did that 5,000 years ago. And look what happened to him. Dead in the ice. Or you could take it the other way and say, look, this is ancient knowledge that really goes back far. Because I've had acupuncture, sort of, for my back, actually, by a proper physiotherapist. A physiotherapist gave me
those fake ones.
Yeah, not those fake ones.
Not just me stabbing you with
That was just Alex. That was the first time. The second time I went to a physiotherapist. Yeah, and he put needles in my back. He didn't call it acupuncture though. He called it something else. I can't remember what he called it.
Skewering.
Yeah, that was it.
Does it hurt? It hurts, right? It must hurt.
It doesn't actually. Well, not for me. Well, if it did hurt.
Art.
If it did hurt, it hurt
Big
less than the
man.
back pain I had. I should say that. Yeah.
So it made it better.
Yeah, I mean, there is some science to it. I think the science is that when you, it's kind of crude, but when you put a needle in at the right juncture in the muscles, naturally it causes inflammation because your body thinks, I've been penetrated, I've been injured, so it inflames. The blood flow goes there, the muscles get inflamed, but then once it calms down, the inflammation and then the calming, I think, basically leads to relaxing the muscles. So if you've got muscle tension and you trigger some kind of inflammation, it will then calm down, but it's all natural. That's the idea behind it. I think. Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah. Just gets blood flowing, basically. And when you think of it that way, you wonder, does it have to be a needle? Could we do something else? But no, I didn't mind it. It was only 4 needles at the base of my spine, and I had 2 or 3 sessions of it, and it was fine. It definitely had a great effect the next day. Wore off pretty quickly, but after a series of it, I was able to. That back pain went away for a couple of years, actually.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, before we start recording, you say your back is hurting.
It's funny. It should come up. This is actually coincidental. I discovered this fact the other day. But yes, right now, people may have noticed on watching us on YouTube, there's a yellow pillow behind me because my lower back, which is where I had the acupuncture or the needles a few years ago, has seized up again, and I'm currently fairly. I'm fairly immobile. So weird thing. Chinese acupuncture, Iceman, Robin's back, Chinese video gaming, and then Pavlov's dog. And
it's all connected.
It's all connected somehow.
Yeah.
Stay where you are, Robin. I'll be over in an hour with some needles
and some dog treats.
Let's fix this.
Well, rather than have you put needles in my back, Alex, shall we just address some of our favourite comments of the week?
Your choice, I suppose. So I've got a comment from James Matthews, and this was on our last podcast, which was asking the question whether video games are good for your mental health. And this was based on a recent study that found out that actually, quite possibly, or very specific video games they were looking at. What was it? Animal Crossing and Plants vs. Zombies.
Yes.
That's the ones, yeah.
But James Matthews said, I found video games really helpful for my mental health throughout this year. One of the things I found hardest to deal with during lockdown is anxiety from the pandemic, being such an overwhelming presence in day-to-day life, yet something that's completely out of my hands. I think playing video games has helped satisfy that need to be in control of something, even if it has no relation to the pandemic, and as a result has been a roundabout way of dealing with that anxiety. And for what it's worth, I spent most of the first lockdown playing the original Dark Souls, which is not a calming game by any stretch of the imagination. And he says, unrelated note, how long before Robin starts a spin-off podcast called Just Castrating?
Oh, that's a good name. Yeah.
I'll be honest, I didn't see that initially when I started reading out the comment, and as I was reading the comment, I was like, "Damn it, I've been tricked. I've been tricked into bringing up castrating."
Thank you, James.
But I wanted to bring that up because it's such a good comment, and it's you really kind of put into words how I think a lot of us have felt actually throughout this year, and I think actually the fact that you've been playing the original Dark Souls with what you were saying, how it helps you feel like you're in control of something, actually makes a lot of sense that it was Dark Souls that you were playing, because you get that sense of overcoming and completion. When you beat a boss, you feel like you're taking back control almost.
I mean, that's the thing. The study that we looked at last week definitely focused on happiness, didn't it?
Yeah.
But there's definitely the other side of it is that distraction and escapism, which I guess we didn't necessarily go into as much, of being kind of the other side of your mental health. So they might not necessarily make you happy, but they're very much can be used as a tool to prevent stress, even if the game's stressful itself. So that's an interesting one.
It's like I often think of it as like punching bags. You know, if having a punching bag is a permissible way to relieve stress, then having video gaming, specifically violent video games or dark video games, it's the same thing, right? Just a different way of dealing with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You can't murder people in real life, so murder people in the game.
Yeah.
Well, my comment comes from Valorum, who writes another fun fact about Stalin's son, because last week my fact was about Stalin hating his son. And so Valorum writes, in 1928, when Yakov, Stalin's son, was 21, he wanted to marry a woman who was 16, but Stalin became enraged about the idea. So Yakov attempted suicide by shooting himself in the chest and narrowly missed his heart. Upon hearing his news, Stalin just brushed it off and said he can't even shoot straight. The couple did eventually marry, though, so it was a happy ending, depending on how you feel about marriage. Moral of the story, Stalin was a dick. So I didn't know that he actually tried to kill himself previously before he ended up successfully doing it after the war.
I mean, it sounds like he had a lot of problems.
He had a few issues, it seems like. But anyway, thanks for that, Valorum. That's interesting to know.
Yes,
that is interesting.
Yeah. Please do share any more interesting stories that you know and that you'd like us to mention on the podcast.
Imagine just finding out that your son tried to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And your reaction is, well, he can't even do that, right?
I mean,
that's wow.
Shooting yourself in the chest, that's not easy, is it? Like, you got to
hold it. And
hold it there.
Squeeze. Yeah.
Why'd you do that? So much more risky than just shooting yourself in the head, surely.
Yeah, put it in your mouth. Even that, people have survived shooting themselves in the...
True, but I imagine it's less likely, isn't it?
Probably. Yeah. On a slightly more cheerful note, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. I think we had 6 people responded on last week's YouTube video to my question about redheads and whether they wear green to complement their red hair. I don't think any of them did. So thanks for answering. Most of them seem to wear dark colours, but a couple of you said you might start wearing green, so I appreciate that. I still think it's a good look. But the comment I actually wanted to point to was from Omar SHSY5Y, so sci-fi, sci-fi. I'm not sure how you say that. Who's a new YouTube member. Ka-ching.
Oh,
thank
nice.
you. And he just says, waiting for the Fast and Furious reviews.
Oh my god, you really want this to happen?
I want it to happen, Alex. You're gonna have to do it. You're gonna have to do it.
You are the self-confessed biggest Fast and Furious fan in the whole of the United Kingdom, if not the world.
They're not even going to be good reviews then, because they're just going to be like, yeah, watch this, it's great. Yeah, this one, watch this.
They're all 10 out of 10.
Alex's hot takes, a deep cut analysis of the Fast and Furious movies.
There's the worst Fast and Furious film, Citizen Kane, all other films.
Oh, Alex, I hope that's not true. Well, on that note, let's move on to the main topic of today's podcast, the big question, which sadly might not be that much of a question, more of a statement, which is, are Australia's COVID quarantine policies violating human rights? Let's get into this. Right, so before we get into the deep issues at hand, let's just summarize the situation in Australia for those of us who don't know, which included me until the other day, to be fair. So back in March, when the pandemic really escalated to a worldwide problem, Australia closed its borders. Not the only country to do so. I believe Canada closed its borders as well, along with other countries around the world. But at the same time as introducing this closed border policy, Australia introduced a mandatory 14-day quarantine for anybody coming into the country. And the cost of being quarantined for those 14 days was met by the states. So Australia, for those who don't know, is organized similarly to America in that it is divided into states, and each state has a government, and those governments are fairly independent from the national governments. So there's a sense of devolution there. I don't think they call it a federal system, but it is effectively a federal system. If anyone who's listening to this podcast who is Australian or knows more about Australian politics, please feel free to clarify that for me. So that was back in March. Closed the borders, introduced a 14-day quarantine. Anybody coming into the country had to do it. And the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has said on numerous occasions that there's no escaping quarantine. Their solution to this situation was, because of the emergency, to put people in hotels. Obviously, as you know, there's lots of hotels at airports. Most people come into the country via airports. There are also hotels at ports, I imagine, where boats come in too. So rather than set up emergency shelters, although they do use some military sites, for example, with barracks accommodation, they mostly put people in hotels. And the cost of keeping people in those hotels for 14 days was met by the government. But in July, the Australian government changed that policy. And they said that anybody coming into the country would have to be quarantined for 14 days and have to pay the bills for their hotel quarantine. So an individual person quarantined in the hotel for 14 days would have to pay 3,000 Australian dollars. A family of 4 would have to pay $5,000. Now, being in quarantine comes with rules. And whilst you're in these hotel rooms, you're not allowed to leave at all. You could be on the 20th floor of a big hotel. You're not allowed to leave that room.
Oh, God. I mean, what are the hotel rooms like? Are they palaces? How big are they?
Well,
here's
part of the controversy. So it's whatever hotel you happen to be in. These hotels could be... Yeah, these could be luxurious or they could be rubbish, but you're still paying...
Travel tavern.
Yeah, exactly. But you could be paying... You're still paying thousands of dollars. And you could be paying the same amount for a pretty decent space or the same amount for a rubbish space. Mm-hmm. Although the amounts that people pay are not standardized. Different states have different amounts. The idea from the national government was that generally the system would be the same across the country, but they left it up to the states to decide. So some people pay more in some states, some people pay less. Some people pay a lot more for a lot less than other people do. It depends on, like Martin said, luck of the draw. Of course, at this stage, your luck is really up there because the system's in play. People are leaving quarantine, and at the same time as people are coming in. So it really is down to what's available when you arrive in the country. At the same time, in July, the Australian government introduced, and this is quite important for the purposes of our discussion, it introduced a cap on people coming into the country, particularly through flights, airplanes. And they basically cut the number of people who are allowed into the country in half, from 8,000 to 4,000 a week, in order to lift pressure on the hotel quarantine system, because basically there aren't enough rooms in the hotels that are signed up to the quarantine. So they said, right, only 4,000 people a week are allowed in. This is the real controversial point, because as well as the conditions that people are staying in, because they're not allowed to leave their rooms, the quality and size of the rooms varies massively. And we've got some anecdotal evidence from individuals in quarantine to suggest that even the food that they're being provided varies massively and might violate certain basic human needs. This, on top of all that, is this problem of flight caps. And this is where the human rights issue really comes in. So just to give some examples of people's experiences in Australian quarantine, people have had a massive problem with getting food, because obviously the hotel staff have to bring them food because they're not allowed to leave their rooms. And the food they get is, like, imagine an airplane meal, but a cheap one. And some people have complained about the food when it has arrived has been cold or uncooked.
And that's all you're eating for the next 14 days.
That's all you're eating for 14 days, yeah. Some people have complained and said they've got a schedule for their meals. They have to they get their meals at a scheduled time, or rather they're supposed to. But say, for example, dinner is 6 p.m. But actually they found themselves at 9 p.m. Dinner hasn't arrived. So they've had to chase up the hotel, ring the staff and say, where's our food? And they've got their food, and when it's arrived, no, it hasn't been cold, it's been a small meal. And then you've got dietary requirements. So an example is some vegans who were in quarantine. They were vegan, and the hotel clearly couldn't provide for vegans, so the dinner they got was a pear and a bread roll.
That doesn't sound great.
God.
No.
Oh my God, yeah.
It doesn't sound great, but are we talking first world problems here? Are we talking?
Do we sound a bit like Karens right now? Are we
talking that you've come back from your holiday or your business travel that you've chosen to go on in July, maybe in March you didn't. You've chosen to go on. Now you want to come back, and you're complaining because the place you have to quarantine for everyone else's public safety isn't up to scratch. Is that what we're talking about here?
It's tempting to say that. It is tempting to say that. But I think a relevant comparison might be made to prisons in Australia.
Okay.
So obviously quarantine serves a different purpose, as you said. This is for public health, the safety of public health. But in Australian prisons, prisoners are allowed daily exercise. A particular example might be in the maximum security prison, Goulburn prison, which has a supermax wing. Prisoners spend 16 hours a day inside their cells in the supermax wing of a maximum security prison. 16 hours a day. Yeah. That means there's 8 hours of the day where they're not in their cell.
Yeah.
And of course, they still get their 3 meals a day. And in fact, in Australian prisons, particularly in the more privately run ones, because about a fifth of Australian prisons are privately run, they do work. Now, the amount that they get paid for that work is a pittance. It can be as low as 82 Australian cents an hour, which is pathetic. But they do earn money, and they can spend their money on luxury goods. So they can spend, I think, some prisons it's up to $100 a month on, CDs, books, whatever they want. Of course, it's a different situation because that's a long-term rehabilitation process for prisoners who've committed crimes, but compared to a 14-day quarantine period. But in that 14-day quarantine period, far from being able to earn money, these people are sitting there paying thousands of dollars for not being able to go out to get any exercise outside of their rooms, and getting poor, if not no food sometimes.
They should be able to. They should be able to work their fee off, really, shouldn't they? While they're in the room.
While they're in their room.
Do some, I don't know.
There's only so much ironing you can do in a hotel room.
Get a hamster wheel hooked up to the electric in the hotel. Pay for the electric of the hotel. Go for a little run. I feel like that's a Black Mirror episode, isn't it?
Basically, it is. It is. There's the one where they're on the treadmills, isn't there? In the credits.
There is that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just without meaning to accidentally pitched dystopian plot idea. So ignore me.
This doesn't sound great, and it sounds like at the very least there are things that definitely need to be improved. I mean, when it comes to food, especially, you've got to give people those basic necessities, and you can look at it in our own country. There was various universities. I think Manchester University was one that was brought upon the news quite recently, of people being stuck in their dorms, in their student accommodation, supposedly being brought food by the I think it was the security actually had to deliver it, but they were basically getting nothing, and a lot of these people were actually suffering from malnutrition and were even like starving because of this, and there was a big hoo-ha about it. And of course, that isn't being a Karen. That's not not being entitled. That's a very basic human right, of course. But I think that maybe there's a propensity to exaggerate the situation if you're unhappy with what's going on. If you're stuck in a hotel room, no one wants that. No one wants to be stuck. You feel like your freedoms are being encroached upon. But of course, clearly there are improvements to be made. It's just whether is this proportionate to well, not to the threat, because of course coronavirus is a big threat, but is it proportionate to what other countries are doing and still remaining safe? I think in the UK they've recently, it's not a great example with all the deaths we've had compared to Australia, but they've recently reduced the quarantine period to 5 days if you have a negative COVID test result. So you still have to quarantine, but there's like this kind of more of a middle ground of, okay, well, it seems like according to the test results, you're in the clear, so you're able to kind of have this shorter period, which seems maybe more proportionate. Of course, in the last 2 days, we've had more deaths than Australia have had in the whole of the pandemic. So
that's true.
It might not be an indicator of the right response, but it seems like.
But at what price success, though? Sorry, Alex.
No. That's a great question. Yeah, but I mean, like you say, Martin, Australia is clearly getting results from this harsh, form of treating people with who like are quarantining. What is the price exactly? Yeah, is it worthwhile? I think kind of probably maybe if they're literally saving that many lives, and we as a country with no land borders, does it make sense? I mean, is there a reason why we as an island nation have done so badly compared to like Australia and New Zealand that have pretty much eradicated this?
I mean, it's tempting to draw a direct comparison with Britain's quarantine policy, which is essentially you have to quarantine for 14 days when you enter the country, but you do it in your own home, which of course allows you to travel from the airport to your own home, and therefore there are potential risk. So yeah, it's, as Alex and Martin already said, Australia's death toll is, gosh, I don't even know what the percentage is. It's 907 at the time of recording this, whereas in Britain we've got 50,000 now.
Yeah, it's over 50,000. It's over 50,000, isn't it? Yeah.
And that's just COVID-related deaths. That's got nothing to do with excess deaths from the strain on the health services. So it's tempting to say that, the Australian government are doing the right thing. And they've had 28,000 cases in total, which pales in comparison to, say, the USA or Britain and a lot of other European countries. But it's not far off some other European countries who have been far less strict. And I think another rule that we should mention about the quarantine, which may make Alex rethink what he just said, is you're in one of these hotels for 14 days. As far as you know, you're out in 14 days, as long as you don't test. As long as you don't test positive for COVID. But if in your hotel building, and let's not forget, some of these buildings are huge. If in your hotel building there is another case of COVID during that 14-day period, you have to keep staying in that hotel for another 14 days. So the example is there was a man in Adelaide who's in the hotel on his 13th day. He was ready to leave on his 14th day. There was a couple in another hotel room, in another part of the hotel, tested positive for COVID. So he had to stay for another 14 days in the hotel. And he had to pay for that 14 days.
Ooh,
so not only is there...
That's not right.
This is the thing,
That's definitely not right.
So not only is he mentally shattered because he's like, I was about to go out and now I'm stuck here again. Whatever life plans and work-related plans he had are affected, and he's economically affected because he has to pay for it. But also, as it turned out, this was called the Parafield, I think, cluster. There was an outbreak in this hotel of cases, and obviously the assumption was, it's a traveller. Someone came into the country, they went to the hotel where they're quarantined with all these other travellers, and someone had COVID and it was transmitted across the hotel. But there was a puzzle about how was it transmitted across the hotel. And it turned out it was actually one of the cleaners who worked for the hotel who contracted COVID. And
that's not fair. That's cheating.
Exactly. So this is where it's become a controversy, because all these people, including this gentleman who's on his 13th day, ready to go, who didn't test positive, was stuck there for longer because a cleaner had COVID and passed it on to some other travellers. But the Australian government's attitude seems to be, if you're coming from outside Australia, you're the problem. That seems to be the attitude they're taking.
Imagine spending made the decision.
Yeah. Imagine spending an entire month in a hotel room, just like one room, eating cold airplane food,
soggy sandwiches.
Yeah.
I mean, as in all good murder mysteries, it's always the maid. I mean, that is a horrendous example, isn't it? What's happened? As you say, like the people there having to pay, I think, is where it gets me. Especially if they're having to return to the country through no fault of their own. It's not like they've gone on a jolly and gone on holiday and now they've come back. I know that when we spoke, you might speak about this in a little bit, but people have had to come back for all sorts of reasons, and it seems like they're not discriminating between the reasons for people's return either. You're all having to pay, regardless of your reasons for coming back in the country. Doesn't matter where you've come from or your financial situation or your working situation. Everyone's in the same boat, and as you say, the blame is definitely lying at the feet of those who are returning as opposed to anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit that my initial reaction to the whole, because I think I saw the headline back in July when they said the Australian government was going to make people pay for their quarantine, and I remember thinking that's harsh, but I mean, I kind of get it. Yeah, you don't have to travel back to Australia in the middle of a pandemic. It's several months in. It's clearly an active choice you've made.
Mm-hmm.
People
just going on holiday.
Yeah, people who are traveling for work, presumably their workplaces might arrange some kind of recompense for the costs of quarantining. I would hope.
You'd hope so.
Yeah, you'd hope so.
I'd hope so. Yeah.
But then I thought, what if I'm an Australian person? I've moved away for economic. I'm essentially an economic migrant. I've moved for work. Australia's got quite a lot of close ties to Hollywood, for example. There's a lot of Australians in Hollywood, so they go there because of the film industry. So they go to Hollywood. They're living in America. The pandemic hits. Their parents are back in Australia. Suddenly there's a COVID outbreak, or not even a COVID related thing. It could be something else. It could be cancer. And their parents severely ill in hospital. And you're like, okay, I need to go back home to visit my parents. And you've got to face the quarantine. You're like, okay, I accept that risk. But you pay thousands of dollars for the price of a ticket to Australia. And then you pay thousands more dollars. And then you're suddenly trapped in this hotel for even longer than you expected to be, paying even more money. And in that time, you might not see your parents before the worst happens.
And if you're in Hollywood, you might well have lost your job.
Yeah, and exactly.
Money.
Yeah. And maybe that's too anecdotal an example. I don't know, but I feel like there must be many examples, particularly when it comes to what they call compassionate reasons for people to return to their homeland. It doesn't have to be Australia. It could be anywhere. And you think those people have a right to see their families, and those people have a right to get home. And this brings us nicely on to the next complication, the wrinkle in this policy, which is that flight cap I mentioned on the number of people that can come into the country. There is a UN Charter on Human Rights which allows people the freedom of movement. It allows them all around the world, anybody of any nation is allowed to leave and return unimpeded to their land, their country of origin. So immediately there's a problem. Like when you're putting a cap on the number of people who can come back into your country every week, you're right, okay, that sounds like a potential violation, maybe a little bit of a bending the rules of this UN Charter about human rights. But the knock-on effect is quite profound, because the Australian government hasn't actually organised this cap on flights. They've just left the airlines to sort it out themselves. So the airlines don't know when they charter a flight, when they schedule it, and when they let people buy tickets for it. That's the most important thing. They don't know how far on, let's say, the scale up towards this cap they are. They have to wait until the week has passed, basically, when the government says, oh, by the way, there are too many people coming in this week. So what happens is airlines, which are privately run and aren't coordinated properly with other airlines, end up scheduling flights, selling the tickets for those flights, which the prices for which are hiked up because, of course, they have to socially distance on these flights. So they've got fewer people on the flights, so they hike up the prices to make up the losses, and then they sell these tickets, and then they suddenly get to the point where, like, oh, okay, the government turns around and says there's too many people coming in, so they cancel flights. And in the meantime, these people are out of pocket. They've paid thousands of dollars. And then
they not get refunds for the flights?
They will be entitled to them, but it's all down to the individual company policies. And as we know, there's been huge problems with people getting refunds all year for pre-booked holidays and things like that. Because obviously companies need cash flow in order to keep running, in order to be in a position where they can refund people who've cancelled their holidays. Without,
we all need cash flow, don't we? As well. If you're taking someone's money and not offering them the flight, or having to book an additional flight, they may not have the funds to be able to do that. So exactly, it puts people in a bit of a hole.
Yeah, they like businesses say that as if that makes any kind of sense. But imagine that. Imagine going to a supermarket and just paying some money, and then they're like, "Oh, I can't actually give this to you now, and I can't give you a refund because we need the cash flow. You've just stolen my money." Then
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Good luck finding food somewhere else.
Yeah.
So this has given rise to several human rights lawyers. I don't know if I can call it a campaign, but there's definitely a growing movement towards filing class action lawsuits against the Australian government for human rights violations. And I don't think it's ever good when a Western democracy is being sued for human rights violations. You shouldn't really want to find yourself in that situation.
I mean, ideally, not like any country.
Any country,
yeah, no,
have human rights
no. Sorry,
violations.
I should say that's bad for any country, but
it's incredibly Eurocentric there, Robin.
there are some countries which you expect. I should
Imagine a Western democracy having human rights violations.
I mean, Western style democracy, but so as well as violating the right of return, I think they call it in the UN Charter. There's also the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which allows children the right to see their parents, and of course, people are being prevented from seeing their parents who've gone away from the country and trying to return. But the specific is that one of the things about human rights, UN charters on human rights, is that lawyers argue, and have argued in the past successfully, that it is illegal to create any kind of regulation that essentially develops a class that puts one type of person above another. That's discrimination, right? Mm-hmm. So when you've created a system of quarantine where A, the person might not be able to get back into the country when they want to, B, might have to pay for multiple flights in order to guarantee that they can get back into the country, and then C, has to then pay for potentially multiple rounds and 14-day quarantines, you've essentially created a system where only the wealthy can get back home. Yeah. And that's what I found really interesting, is that at first, as Martin reacted, you think, okay, maybe that's a bit unreasonable, but it sounds logical and it sounds fair. And then you think about the consequences, the long-term consequences of these policies, and you think, wait a second, actually, basically, only rich business, essentially, because who's traveling for work is going to be already successful business people, right?
Yeah.
Rich, probably white business people and rich families are going to be able to get back into Australia. And even some of the middle-class families might find themselves bankrupt at the end of it.
This sounds like, and I don't want this to be too political, but I mean, it sounds like the failure here, the noticeable theme throughout this is that the government has taken a step back and let businesses deal with huge decisions and take the charge of these like big decisions that they've made. And that seems to be where a lot of these problems have occurred, like, right, with the flights. They're overcharging on the flights because they're reducing the number of seats. Nothing's being subsidized by the government, basically, so that's being put on the individual at the end to have to pay for the expensive hotel rooms. And then there'll be the business cost-cutting measures because they're not being subsidized by the government, hence the like terrible food and service throughout all this. It feels like, I don't know, the government just hasn't taken charge and they let like businesses do this.
Yeah.
You look at like the comparison, I guess, between Australia, that's running a conservative government with Scott Morrison in charge, compared with New Zealand. Has New Zealand had any of these complaints? I don't know what their policies are. I don't know. I mean, that's my impression. Like the idea itself, I'm not like totally against, but I feel like they left it to companies to be in charge of that, and then that's just rife with gonna be rife with like inequality, and it's gonna put it on the consumer.
It's laissez-faire politics at its worst, because it's saying we're not going to nationally coordinate this. We're going to let individual state governments determine their own systems based on a model where we establish, which depends on private companies doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. And there's clearly a scale of I guess the word misdemeanors, right? Isn't it? There's a scale of how serious these things are. Like, I think there needs to be a system where they take into account your reason for initially leaving the country, your reason for wanting to come back into the country, and then kind of, I'm not saying that they change the quarantining measures, although it does seem a bit extreme that people have to spend, up to 14 days, and then if someone elsewhere in the hotel gets it, then they have to spend another 14 days and pay for it. That seems insane. But it does seem like, okay, if the food's a bit crap, let's make sure that those are only isolated incidents or don't happen at all. Not that much of a big deal, really. Not really.
Yeah.
You're only there for a couple of weeks. People complaining that they're having to stay in their rooms. So be it. You're there for 14 days. It's different from prison because you're not in there for years. You're in there for a hopefully finite amount of time.
Yeah.
But of course,
unless they keep bringing cleaners.
Stop these COVID cleaners. Yeah,
bring them in every 13 days. Keep that money flowing.
It's part of the conspiracy. They're working alongside the hotel chains to keep them afloat.
Yeah.
But yeah, then there are of course the much more serious things of people having to spend multiple rounds of thousands of dollars on having to stay in the hotel. People not being able to see family members for bereavement or whatever. So. Yeah, I mean, it's a mess, isn't it? It's a mess, clearly, and they haven't thought it through properly.
Yeah.
But do you guys think that any of this responsibility does lie on people now leaving the country, knowing that these systems are in place? This has been in place since July. If you go now, say you were to leave Australia on holiday, some things you can't account for. Someone getting ill at home, you can't account for. But if you're going on holiday, you're going away for business, surely you now have to expect that if you come back into the country, your flight might be cancelled. You might have to stay in a hotel for multiple rounds, and this will be the cost. You'd be very unlucky if both things happen and your costs pile up. But surely there has to be some kind of individual responsibility on the back of knowing that this is government policy. Granted, it has changed, and they've cut the number of people that can come back into the country in half. And these things, it's not a stationary policy. It's changing. What do you think about that argument?
I totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. And I think during this discussion, the people I'm feeling sorry for are like the people returning for compassionate reasons, and it was just people who have a right to come back and see their families. But yeah, you're so right. People coming there on holiday or on business surely know the risks and know that. Yeah, they have very limited sympathy from me. I mean, I think some of these measures are a bit ridiculous in my opinion, and I think that they should at the very least get good meals if they're going to be staying in these rooms all for this whole time and paying like quite a lot of money for it. But yeah, I mean, you're flying to these places on holiday during a pandemic. Come on, everyone's making sacrifices this year. You can't don't be can I speak to the manager about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of facts I'd like to mention and the quotation I'd like to read out, and then I'd like to share my personal thoughts, which are kind of in chime with both of you, I think. The first is that I forgot to mention that there was Australia announced when they closed their borders, when they said that people would be able to return again, they said that you'd have to pre-register, that Australian nationals, expatriates living abroad, would have to register for permission to come back. And about 36,000 people did. And as of the time of recording this, which is the end of November, I think less than half of those people have been able to return. Which again ties to this cap on flights is leading to a violation of human rights. The ability to return to your home country is being restricted by your government.
Is that people who signed up for this but then haven't returned? Or have actually been prevented from returning? Because I think there's probably a bit of a difference there.
Probably, I imagine it's a combination of the two. People who signed up and said, I declare my intention to return, I want to be put on a flight. When you sign up to this register, you get assigned flights, basically. You get on the priority list for flights. You definitely
want to come back.
Yeah, and you've probably paid for flights as well at this point.
Okay. In fact, I guess there's a difference between showing an interest in wanting to come home and wanting and being at the airport or wherever and having your flight rejected.
It's not quite the same as I'm interested in this Facebook event too. I'm attending.
Trying to desperately hang on to the wing as it's chartering on the runway.
Yeah. So I don't know what that means exactly, but the fact that half the people who were compelled by the government to register their intent to come home and who therefore were put on a long list from something, for getting on flights, they still haven't returned. That's an issue, I think, particularly because we're coming up to Christmas and the government has promised that everyone will be able to get home for Christmas, but there's half of them to deal with. So how's that going to happen? The second thing is Prime Minister Scott Morrison has made it very clear on many occasions that there is no alternative to travellers other than the hotel quarantine. You have to be quarantined. He himself has made several trips abroad on political missions, and he's basically quarantined in luxury in a mansion with his own gym and his own chef and his own staff waiting on him. The rules allow for that, but I'm just saying that leads nicely into the quotation, which I want to read, which is from a human rights lawyer who was born in Australia, and he's considered one of the world's leading human rights lawyers. His name is Jeffrey Robertson, and he said, civil liberties may be necessarily curtailed under the law, but what is important is that they are curtailed fairly, where you don't have a privileged class, and they are curtailed for as little time as possible. So the attitude of the Australian government does seem to contradict what the human rights lawyers are saying, which is you don't create a privileged class, you don't impinge upon human rights, even when there's a public health crisis and you have the right as a government to pass laws that preserve the public health. But besides that, I do think it sounds like it's a technical problem. So everyone who's complaining about the human rights violations and the conditions they're in, it's first world problems, but they're kind of entitled to complain about those because they're paying for it.
Yes,
I think it's
a good customer service.
Yeah,
issue.
it's this weird, kind of like the uncanny valley almost, this kind of twilight zone where the Venn diagram where they cross, where you go from one extreme of basic human rights, the government must provide everything, to consumer rights, and it's all about the private sector meeting customer demands. And in this Venn diagram, you've got these people currently in quarantine kind of occupy that middle bit where they're simultaneously, the government needs to protect them and provide for them because the government has imposed the rule that puts them in quarantine. But at the same time, it's reasonable that the government should say, you have been warned, you have to pay for this, so it's your decision.
It's like a weird messed up society where prisoners are leaving TripAdvisor reviews on their prisons.
Kind of, but where the TripAdvisor reviews should really be listened to because, these people are human beings, they have rights. They sounds like those rights might be being violated by the government, and even where their rights aren't being violated by the government and the government is basically saying, hey, your decision, mate, you deal with it. The companies and the hotels should be providing a better service.
Absolutely.
So
I won't be staying at your airport hotel ever again.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting discussion. I'm glad thank you both of you, and for everyone at home listening to this on whatever podcast platform you listen to us and watching us on YouTube, for listening to me read off a load of facts about the current situation in Australia, because it's also more complex than I've made it sound. There are lots of, it's COVID, right? Everything's complicated. But it does sound like one extreme reaction, and I do personally feel in the UK our government clearly could have done a much better job than they've done.
Yeah, I think over the next few years there's going to be like a lot of investigations and reviews on like government's policies during this time, and what went right and what went wrong, and who did a good job and who didn't. I mean, it should be happening right now as well. Yes. I'm not saying like, oh well, we'll be able to tell years down the line. No, people should be held to account now.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be interesting looking back, hopefully, when this is all behind us, and we'll have that clearer picture.
Yeah. But I mean, according to our Prime Minister, it's a waste of time to hold inquiries. So
waste of time.
Waste of time.
Just support us unconditionally, you idiots.
But I do think, given in the UK, for example, we've had much less strict rules than Australia, and we've had worse COVID public health results, let's say, but we're also going into one of the worst recessions. The economic impact is going to be one of the worst in the world as well. you kind
Good
of
thing
wonder.
we got Brexit coming up.
I mean,
That's
yeah,
gonna
it's
really
going to
boost
fix
our
everything.
figures.
It does make you wonder who exactly got it right. You know,
Clearly not the UK.
not the UK, and maybe in years to come in Australia, they'll look back and say, "Thank you. We're sorry for the individual suffering that was caused, but we're happy that COVID didn't devastate our country more than it did." It'll be interesting to compare and contrast different countries' approaches.
How fun!
Way! It's my favorite game. Like every Christmas, you bring out Monopoly. Now it's going to be bring out the COVID comparison chart.
Oh no!
Ooh.
I mean, it'd be funny if it wasn't so tragic in the personal loss. That's the issue here, isn't it? There's the stories when you look at the stats, and it's 5, 6. Well, in the UK, 500 or 600 people dying a day, and it's like, each one of those has dozens of friends and family, and they've suffered really, really tragic losses here, and it's just. That's why I have limited sympathy for people who are complaining about the sandwiches and complaining about being stuck in a room, even if you're in there and having to pay a few thousand dollars. Yes, I disagree that you should have to do that. It should be covered by the state, especially if you're coming back for what you class as valid reasons to be returning. But yeah, I mean, I have to admit I do have limited sympathy when there's so much when the death toll is so high. But it's not in Australia, and maybe there's a different perspective there at the moment because that's the case. It's no one's dying. Why do we have to stay in here? Which is quite often seems to be the case when people don't have that personal connection.
Yeah,
I mean that's a good point. Just the psychology of it. Yeah, Australians might be more inclined to travel because they have been less affected by it. Yeah. But good luck getting back.
Well, yeah.
So I've booked a month's holiday, 1 week of holiday. 3 weeks of getting back.
Yeah.
Where are you going on holiday? Right. I'm doing a big road trip of the US, culminating in like a party in the White House. that was the place that I just thought of that would be most likely to have coronavirus at the moment. I don't know.
It's got to be up there.
Probably right, yeah.
I mean, there was that garden party in the White House, wasn't there, where there was people hugging who had coronavirus.
And then there's the election night party where people got coronavirus as well. So party in the White House for coronavirus.
Also known as the loser party.
100% chance of getting COVID.
There we go. Anyway, I've got a quiz because I was behind in the quizzes in terms of I was winning the quizzes.
We were winning the quizzes,
I was behind in terms of the number of quizzes I had hosted. I've got another one for you today. So are you guys up for that?
I love one.
Sounds lovely.
Love it.
Good. It is the quiz time. 10 questions plus a bonus question if we're tied. General knowledge, a mixture of some music, some sport, perhaps a rugby question.
Why have you done this, Martin?
And also some movies and general other stuff. So anyway, Robin, you've got hiccups, haven't you?
I do.
Wait, hang on. Music, sports, and movies. That's the holy trinity. You've screwed me, Martin.
Okay. Well, how good's your baby animal knowledge?
Pretty good, actually. Let's bring it on.
He loves his baby animals.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apologies for my hiccups, everyone. Apparently that whiskey I drank has got the better of me.
Fair enough. I mean, that happens to the best of us, Robin. Don't worry about it. I won't count it as a buzzer.
Thanks.
Will you count it as an answer, though? Like his first answer?
No, you can't do it.
You'll have to go with your first answer, which was, in fact, a hiccup. Anyone watching this, Robin's convulsing with the vigorous hiccups. It's quite funny to try and watch him suppress these. So anyone who's listening, do head on over to the YouTube channel and
excuse me.
This is too good. Let's carry on. So your buzzers, Alex, what buzzer have you gone for this week?
Well, as it's the season finale of Series 2, how could I not go for the tried and tested?
Excellence. There is a California champagne by Paul Masson, inspired by that same French excellence.
Oh, amazing.
Do you think that Orson would be proud if he would like see this and be like, okay, they've fully invested in me in this podcast? He probably wouldn't remember any of it. But like, was that me? I don't
Does he do anything?
remember. Yeah, he would just be drunk, wouldn't he? Robin, what have you gone for?
I've also gone for what must
Orson
be
Welles.
no the necessary thing in
That'd be
the
confusing.
season 2 finale.
Is there anyone here that wants to make contact?
Is that like
That sounds
sped
sped
up
up.
as well?
Slightly.
That was really quite weird.
What's in these woods?
There we go.
Show yourselves.
Normal speed.
Did
There we
anyone
go.
die
Very
here?
good. It never ends. It just carries on.
Just keeps going.
Question number. Are you both ready? Question number one.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Question number one. Which musician had an alter ego called Ziggy Stardust?
Celebrated for its excellence.
That's annoying.
That's Alex's. Alex got there first.
It was
I
Alex.
believe that would be David Bowie.
Bowie. It was Bowie. Well done. 1-0 to Alex. Question number two. What is the longest road in the world?
Has always been celebrated for its excellence.
Alex, how's your road knowledge?
Are
Are you a road man?
I'm not especially. I don't know. Is it? I'm thinking it's going to be one in America. Router 66.
It's not a Ruta 66.
Okay.
Anyone here that wants to make contact?
Yes, Robin.
Is it the road to your heart?
It is the road to Amarillo. It's not the road to my heart or the road to Amarillo. But Alex, you're right. It does travel through America.
Oh, through America. Whoa.
Could we have a clue? I don't know roads in America.
Yeah, apart from
really.
Route 66, I'm not really.
Okay, you might not get this then.
Great.
What is a... Okay. The first word of this could be something you cook in.
Is there anyone here that wants to make contact?
Has always been celebrated
If
for
anyone
its
Robin,
is in these
Robin just got there first, I believe.
Well, I'm going to go for Panama, but
Okay.
I can think of a canal, not a road.
So what's your answer?
Panama Canal.
It's not the longest road in the world. It's not the Panama Canal. I can confirm it's not the Panama Canal. Alex, you had a bit of a
Yeah, you had a moment there.
Yeah, I think I might have heard of this. Is
Okay.
it the Pan American Highway?
It's the Pan American Highway, which travels through the US, Canada, Alaska, Mexico, and parts of Central America, and is 19,000 miles long.
That's crazy.
Classic road trip, that. Just on one highway.
Yeah,
the whole way through.
Yeah, so yeah, well done. Question number two. Well done for getting that from cooking.
Yeah, good knowledge.
Yeah, I thought I'd given a bit of a wayward clue there.
Pan was good, yeah.
Pan,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
okay, good. 2-0. Question number three. Who played Johnny Cash in the film Walk the Line?
woods. Show
Woods.
yourselves.
It wasn't Woods.
Did anyone die here?
Who was it, Robin?
It was Joaquin Phoenix.
It was Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh,
Well
yeah,
done.
it was.
Well done. 2-1. Question number 4. What version of rugby is played at the Olympics?
The French.
Alex.
That would be rugby league.
It is not rugby league.
Okay.
Is
Whatever.
Big Tap in here? Is
Robin?
Big Tap
Is it Rugby Union?
It's not rugby union.
Well, I'm all out of ideas.
Yeah, this is. Is it Olympic rugby? Oh.
I guess it's technically a form of rugby union, kind of. Because you have. Yeah, but it's not rugby union. No, it's a very specific type of rugby.
Oh, that's no good, is it?
The other one.
French
On
champagne
the main
The
one.
other one.
Yeah.
has always been celebrated for its excellence.
Yes, Alex.
Is it touch rugby or tag rugby?
It's not tag rugby.
Oh.
I imagine that you guys will have heard of it when I say it. If you don't get it,
How is it not?
I'll give a clue after Robin. After you've done another guess.
Oh,
If you-
oh, really? Oh, I can only think of Rugby Union. So.
Okay.
When in doubt, go Panama Canal.
Okay. This type of rugby refers to the number of players playing it.
I feel like I've even had that question before. How many players play rugby? But
Well, this type of rugby, rugby league and rugby union all have a different number of players playing it.
Show yourselves.
There's instruction to the players.
Yes.
11s.
It's not 11s. You might not have heard of it then.
Spain
Surprised.
has always been celebrated for its excellence.
Is it 15s?
15s is rugby union. It's not rugby. It is rugby sevens. Heard of rugby
That was
sevens?
when. Oh,
Rugby
I thought sevens was like. Sorry.
7 people.
I thought it was like
7
children's
players.
rugby.
Yeah.
I thought it was children's rugby.
Rugby sevens is
Oh.
a professional sport. They do tournament. They do tournaments all around the world, including Dubai and Singapore and London.
I
Yeah,
actually
rugby
knew
sevens.
that. I'm so annoyed at myself. Oh,
Yeah. they
Sorry,
play-
sorry, Robin.
It's all
Sorry,
right.
Robin.
It's fine.
No worries. Well, it's still 2-1. Question 5.
You're still losing. Don't worry.
Question 5. Which two countries does Mount Everest sit in?
Spain has always been celebrated for its
Yes,
excellence.
Alex.
This is going to be embarrassing. It's Nepal and I don't know. Nepal and I don't know that region of the world at all. China.
China.
It's Nepal and China.
Is it?
Damn it.
It is. 3-1. Good guess. Good guess. It's a big country, so you know.
That was
a
my
good one to
thinking.
guess. Yeah.
It's just likely.
If in doubt, Panama Canal.
Nepal and the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal.
I mean, it is the longest road in the world, so it probably probably goes over Everest too. Question number 6. What was the highest grossing movie in the US, because there were higher grossing ones in China, in 2020?
Ooh.
Has always been celebrated for its
cinemas
excellence.
have been
There's
closed.
a California champagne by Palmas.
Yes, Alex, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I've said this now, and I'm just realizing that I think it bombed at the box office. So I think it's a stupid guess. I'll say it anyway. Was it Tenet?
It wasn't Tenet.
Stick tap
No.
in here.
Although it was fairly high up on the list just because there weren't that many films.
Yeah.
Show yourself.
Yeah,
Boudica.
Robin, what do you have in
It
mind?
feels like an age ago, but was it Bad Boys for Life?
It was Bad Boys for
Oh,
Life.
wow. Yeah, I wouldn't have
Yeah.
got that.
Yeah, which I think was released in February.
Yeah, beginning of the
I
year.
think.
And everyone
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, will it be a hit in February?" And it was like, and it was a hit. And then little did anyone know it would be the hit.
Yes, yeah, exactly. No room for Marvel movies to be released. So yeah, Bad Boys for Life was the
Although-
highest grossing.
Bone of contention here. It's the third movie in the series. You can't call it Bad Boys for Life.
For Life. Yeah.
That's your fourth movie.
Yeah.
You skipped
Yeah,
one.
they should have held off on that one, shouldn't they?
Yeah.
What were you thinking? Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that is 3-2. It's close. Question 7. What is the literal translation of al dente?
Spain
Is there anyone here that wants
has
to
always
make
been
contact?
celebrated for its excellence.
Oh, who was that? Was that you, Alex? I think it was just. Or was it you, Robin?
No, go for it.
No, did
No, I
you?
think it was Alex. Go for it.
It was a bit of a blur. Go on, Alex. What do you think?
Is it the Panama Canal? I don't know.
He doesn't
I
know.
don't know.
Robin, what do you think?
It's like off the tooth or something.
Close.
Like a tooth. As the tooth.
I'll give you that. It's at the tooth.
Oh, at
Okay,
the tooth.
I wouldn't have
Yeah,
got that.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Well done for the toothy bit. You get the
Thanks.
and that, I mean, it usually refers to pasta, doesn't it? When cooking pasta.
Yeah.
The Italian. And it's a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
Fine. Oh, it's probably really pleasant for everyone at home.
I imagine
Hiccups
so.
right in their
It's
ear.
probably it must be the worst ASMR ever. Someone hiccuping into the mic.
Sorry.
Question
Amazing.
number 8.
Oh.
3 all.
Oh god.
Well, that's very generous of you, by the way, giving me that. But thank
Yeah, you got 2 of the words right. Number 8. What's a baby ant called?
Oh.
Oh.
Oh. A baby ant.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh.
A baby ant.
If anyone is in these woods, show yourselves.
Yes.
Larvae?
No, it's not larvae.
Oh, that's a good guess though. I thought, yeah.
Hmm.
Champagne has always been celebrated for its excellence.
Yes, Alex.
Is that? I'm not going to say the Panama Canal. Are they just baby ants? Are they just baby ants, and it's a trick?
No, they're not. They're not baby ants. Well, they are baby ants. They're not called baby ants. But your clue is that the word for a baby ant has the word ant in it.
There's a California champagne
Yes,
platform.
Robin. What are you thinking?
Oh, okay. Infant.
Infant? No, but that's clever. I like it. But it's
That's
not
a
an
bloody-
infant.
It's not
That's a bloody good guess.
Infant ant.
How is it not infant? I'm sorry. I feel like
Well,
Robin
it should
deserves
be.
the point for
That's
that.
Should be changed.
Son. Inspired.
Is it Antley? Like
No.
like Clement Attlee, but Antley.
It's not. It's actually an antling.
Antling.
Oh, really?
yeah.
Antling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, does it?
Less sense
Does
less
it?
sense than infant, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. How many other insects are called lings? Their babies called
No.
lings, like caterpillar
Good
ling,
question.
moth
Um,
ling.
Antling. It does.
fam-
It sounds
familiar,
nice,
though.
doesn't it? It sounds pretty cute,
Yeah.
doesn't it? A
Oh
little
yeah,
antling.
it's an old English thing to do, and I love it. But no,
Yeah.
that's not normal.
That's not right.
It's not right.
So it's still 3-3.
I want a pun on it. I want a pun at the very least for a baby animal name.
Yeah. You can always petition to have it changed, but I think there are probably more pressing matters in the world right now.
No, I don't. I disagree.
Disagree wholeheartedly.
People comment down below. Let's start a petition to change it to infant.
I mean, it's meant to be that ants, if you added up all the mass of the ants in the world, it would equal that of humans, roughly. That's the old. I don't know if that's true. It could be one of those common myths and misconceptions, but yeah. So maybe they should have as much dedication to them as we do as humans.
They will be our overlords eventually.
Exactly. Question number 9. Which fast food chain has the most outlets in the world?
Oh,
There's a California champagne by Paul Masson.
Yes, Paul Masson.
Is it Subway?
It's Subway.
yeah.
Eat fresh.
Oh, I was hoping
so
you'd
they
say
say.
McDonald's. Damn it.
That's the misconception, isn't it? 42,600 Subways at the last count compared to 38,700 McDonald's.
That's because Subway has like 5 every square mile.
In London it does,
Yeah,
doesn't
it
it?
does.
It's true.
Turn a
All
corner,
40
there's a Subway.
Yeah, every Subway is basically in London. Question. What was that? That was question number 9.
Ooh.
And is it
this
4-3?
Is question number 10.
No.
And it's 4-3, is it?
No.
It is 4-3.
So this is the final question
This will be the deciding
of this
question.
quiz. But the thing is, if I get this question, and I'm not saying I will, but like if I win this quiz, we have to have like another little extra question to decide who wins second place.
Okay.
Oh.
I
So
see.
maybe
Like a
save
playoff.
Because if
Maybe save the bonus question for that or something.
Okay, cool. Question 10.
Unless you get this question right though, in which case we'll need a new question.
Very true. Question 10. What is the world record for the most balls juggled at once?
This closest wins.
We'll go for closest
Big
wins.
tapping in these woods. Show yourself, Boudica.
Yes. Robin, what are you thinking?
I'm going to go for 20.
20, okay.
If this is closest wins, that's such an annoying like answer. I was thinking around 20. I don't even know what side of that to go on.
50-50.
Oh,
Alex.
no.
50-50.
20? That seems ridiculous, doesn't it?
Depends on the size of the ball.
Has always been celebrated for its excellence.
I'm going to go 19.
19. It's only 11.
No, really?
It's 11 by Alex Barron from the UK, who did it in 2012.
Alex Barron. Eh?
Yes. He managed to. Yeah,
Alex Barron.
and yeah, he managed to do. I think he juggled 23 times, which qualified. I think it has to be think something like over 20 you have to juggle
Oh,
to
wow.
qualify. So it's not a whole load, but it seems like once you get above 5 or 6, it becomes very, very, very difficult.
These rules sound very loose and. What is this? 11.
What?
That's not even
11.
Why is it not like a nice round
It
number?
should be. Why is it not more than that? I'm disappointed with the one.
I'm just surprised that no one's beaten it since
Exactly.
2012.
Is that like with regulation juggling balls, or can you juggle with like
maybe that's the thing.
styrofoam or
Yeah.
something to make it super easy?
Good question.
What about like those like the batons
Like
that
the
they
bowling
juggle
pin
as
things.
well?
They always look
Yeah, but
quite
you have
good
to-
because they're
you have to
weighted,
catch-
so you can kind of.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you still have to be able to catch them on the right side, don't you? It's just more risk.
Mm,
Yeah.
What
true.
about a sword?
juggling swords?
Mm.
fantastic. There's a fantastic incentive to catch it
Mm.
in the right.
There's probably someone who can do that, I imagine.
Juggling swords?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. There will be people who've done it.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then
Okay,
caught it,
and-
swallowing the sword as the final catch.
Oh,
Yeah, you could do that at least once.
Yes.
true.
And with the crowd applauses, like, yay!
And then
he's
they
not,
leave.
He's not moving.
Yeah. He's so dedicated to
Yeah.
his craft, and then they leave, and
But I'm distracting us from the point, which is Alex won the quiz. Well done, Alex.
Well done, Alex. Well done.
Woo. Look at me. I've fallen from grace after being first place last time. You know, Martin.
it
is
was
the victor.
close. I think I'm
Well, thank
glad
you.
that at the very least it was close, and it was a good competition.
It was.
So I'm happy with that at least. And next season I'm coming back for you both.
Just
Remember-
interesting 3. Alex rises.
Remember that reign of terror I had in Stories from the Bunker?
Oh,
That's
with
coming
Lenzo.
That
back.
was, yeah. I'm terrified of that coming back. That
You took a whole load of coke before every episode.
was...
You're so
Coke and-
quick with your reactions.
Coke and QI. That's my.
Well,
that's my
I still don't
recipe.
understand how your buzzer reactions are faster than ours. I don't get that at all.
Well, the trick is, Robin, I push play every single time, even if I don't know the answer. And then I think of the answer, or I say Panama Canal now.
Okay.
Season 3, I'm going to say Panama Canal a lot.
Oh, well, thank you all for joining us for that spectacular season finale, which has probably gone on for hours now. But thank you all for joining us. And please keep your comments coming in below. And thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and our YouTube members. And we'll see you next week for season 3.
See you then, guys.
Bye.
Bye.